The detention facility of Station Keth 9 had seen its share of dangerous prisoners. War criminals who had glassed entire moons, bioterrorists who could synthesize plagues from cafeteria scraps, and once, memorably, a Vorthak assassin who had killed 3 guards with a spoon before anyone realized she was awake. But none of those prisoners had ever sat cross-legged in their restraint chair, humming what could only be described as an aggressively cheerful tune, while sketching mathematical equations in the condensation on the observation window. The human did this for approximately 4 hours before anyone worked up the courage to enter her cell. Subject exhibits no signs of distress, reported Chief Interrogator Vexka, whose species had evolved specifically to detect fear through biochemical analysis. His sensory tendrils twitched with confusion. In fact, her stress hormones suggest she finds this situation amusing. Commander Thale 9, representing the hegemony's military intelligence division, studied the readouts with the sort of grim fascination typically reserved for dissecting unexploded ordnances. She destroyed 17 orbital platforms, crippled our entire defensive grid, and somehow turned our own shield generators into what our engineers are calling the most elegant distributed fusion reaction they've ever witnessed. And you're telling me she's enjoying herself? Perhaps enjoying is too strong, offered Dr. Kess, the Melody xenopsychologist, whose crystalline form chimed softly with each word. But she demonstrates no anxiety markers consistent with captured combatants. Through the reinforced viewing panel, the human, who appeared to be barely past adolescence by their species' standards, was now using her finger to trace complex diagrams on the metal floor. Even upside down, Vexka could recognize them as improvements to the station's power coupling systems. Right, Vexka decided, his 4 arms spreading in what his species considered a gesture of resigned determination. Let's go ask her how she did it. The interrogation chamber had been designed by the hegemony's finest behavioral architects to induce psychological pressure through subtle environmental manipulation. The lighting was exactly wrong for human vision. The temperature kept fluctuating by degrees calculated to create subconscious discomfort, and the chair was positioned to make the occupant feel isolated and exposed. The human had somehow managed to make it look comfortable. Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story. Hello, she said brightly, as the 3 interrogators entered, as if greeting friends at a social gathering rather than addressing the representatives of a galactic military power. I was wondering when someone would come by. The reading material you provided is fascinating, but some of the engineering principles seem a bit, well, inefficient isn't the right word. Unnecessarily complex? Vexka's training had covered hundreds of interrogation scenarios. Defiant prisoners, broken prisoners, prisoners who tried to bargain or threaten or seduce their way to freedom. Nobody had prepared him for prisoners who offered constructive criticism. State your designation and military rank, Commander Thale 9 demanded, his cybernetic implants whirring as they recorded every micro-expression and biometric response. Oh, I'm not military. I'm Zara. Well, that's not my full name, but you'd probably have trouble with the pronunciation. I'm a 3rd-year biochemistry student at MIT Massachusetts Institute of Technology, she added helpfully, when their translation systems clearly struggled with the reference. Though I'm thinking of switching to aerospace engineering. Your propulsion systems are adorable. Dr. Kess's crystalline structure brightened with interest. You claim to be an academic, yet you single-handedly neutralized our most advanced defensive installation. Neutralized? Zara looked genuinely puzzled. I just turned it off? The quantum resonance was interfering with my scanner readings. I'm writing a paper on exotic particle interactions, and your shields were creating some really interesting subspace distortions I wanted to study. But then I realized your containment protocols were running about 30% above safe parameters, so I recalibrated the whole network to prevent a cascade failure." The three interrogators exchanged glances. In their species' non-verbal communications, this roughly translated to, "Is she insane, lying, or telling the truth? And which option is more terrifying?" "You described this as a casual academic exercise," Vexka said carefully, his sensory organs working overtime to detect any trace of deception. He found none, which only deepened his confusion. "Yet our intelligence indicates you are part of Earth's Special Forces units." Zara laughed, actually laughed, a sound like crystalline bells that somehow managed to make the sterile interrogation chamber feel warmer. "Special Forces? Oh, you must mean my siblings, though I wouldn't call them that. My brother Jake just finished his tour with the Marines, and my sister Maya works in aerospace consulting, but they're not— Wait." Her expression shifted, becoming thoughtful rather than amused. "How much do you actually know about humans?" Commander Thale 9's optical array focused with mechanical precision. "We know enough. Your brother infiltrated our Capital Fleet construction facility. Jake worked construction one summer to pay for college. Your sister destabilized 3-star systems' economic frameworks. Maya wrote her master's thesis on resource allocation inefficiencies. Did you guys actually read it? Because she makes some really good points about supply chain optimization." Dr. Kess chimed a note that would have been discord in her species' musical language. "You speak of these accomplishments as if they were trivial pursuits." "Well, they kind of were." Zara shrugged, a gesture that somehow conveyed both confusion and a slight apology for the confusion. "I mean, Jake was just trying to understand how your manufacturing processes worked. He's always been curious about engineering. And Maya gets really excited about economic models. She probably didn't realize her recommendations would actually change anything. She just likes finding optimal solutions." Vexka felt something that his species had no word for, but humans might have called existential dread. "Your family members infiltrate our most secure facilities and restructure our fundamental systems as intellectual curiosity?" "Pretty much. Though infiltrate is kind of a strong word. Jake said everyone was really nice to him. Apparently, they were excited to have someone ask questions about their work." Zara paused, tilting her head with genuine interest. "Are you guys okay?" "Your biosignatures are spiking in what looks like stress patterns." Commander Thale 9's cybernetics struggled to process this information within existing threat assessment frameworks. Every model produced the same impossible result. This human child represented either no threat whatsoever, or a threat so profound that their analytical systems couldn't quantify it. "How?" he asked, with the careful precision of someone defusing an antimatter bomb. "Do humans define special forces?" Zara brightened considerably. "Oh, that's easy. Special forces are elite military units trained for unconventional warfare, reconnaissance, and direct action missions. They go through years of specialized training and are deployed for the most challenging operations." She paused, looking thoughtful. "Though, honestly, after meeting you guys, I'm starting to think our challenging might be different from your challenging." The interrogators sat in silence as this sank in. Slowly, Dr. Kess voiced the question they were all thinking. What do humans consider basic education? Zara's smile was radiant with enthusiasm. "Oh, that's a great question. By the time we graduate high school, that's around age 18, most of us have covered basic mathematics through calculus, fundamental physics, including quantum mechanics and relativity, chemistry, biology, literature analysis, historical patterns, and at least 2 languages. Then university is where you really start learning specialized subjects." "And what?" Vexka asked with the tone of someone watching their worldview crumble in real time. Do you consider specialized subjects? Well, I'm focused on biochemistry with an emphasis on exotic matter interactions. But my roommate is studying theoretical xenosociology. Basically, how alien civilizations might develop differently based on environmental and biological factors. She's actually been really excited to meet you guys, though I suppose that's not happening anytime soon. Zara looked around the interrogation chamber with what appeared to be mild disappointment. This is kind of like being in detention, isn't it? The three interrogators realized, with the sort of dawning horror typically reserved for discovering that the monster under the bed was real and had been doing their taxes, that they might have fundamentally misunderstood the nature of their problem. It wasn't that humans had special forces. It was that humans considered everyone else's special forces to be roughly equivalent to their high school graduates. Admiral Corv Thess had presided over the conquest of 47 star systems, witnessed the heat death of binary suns, and once personally executed a rebel commander with nothing but his ceremonial claws and righteous fury. In his 800 years of service to the hegemony, he had never called an emergency session because of a single prisoner. He was calling one now. The holographic conference table materialized in the command center of Dreadnought Inexorable, casting blue-white shadows across the assembled faces of the hegemony's most decorated military minds. Fleet Admiral Zeph Knox appeared first, her scaled features etched with the sort of exhaustion that came from staying awake for 72 hours straight, reading classified reports. General Krath Voss followed, his insectoid form clicking with agitation as his secondary arms gestured at data streams, invisible to the others. Before we begin, Admiral Corv Thess announced, I want everyone to understand that what we're about to discuss is not a drill, a simulation, or a psychological evaluation of our threat assessment protocols. This is a genuine strategic crisis. Crisis? General Krath Voss's compound eyes refracted light in patterns that indicated skepticism. We're discussing a single juvenile alien who disabled some defensive satellites. Defense Minister Aya Val materialized at the far end of the table, her energy-based form flickering with what appeared to be barely contained panic. General, perhaps you should review the latest intelligence briefings before making light of our situation. Admiral Corv Thess activated the central display, which immediately began cycling through a series of incident reports that made the assembled commanders progressively more uncomfortable. Incident 1. 3 standard months ago, an unidentified humanoid infiltrated Shipyard Delta 7. Security footage shows him asking construction workers about optimal hull configurations and theoretical improvements to plasma flow dynamics. Within 6 days, he had reorganized our entire manufacturing process, increasing efficiency by 40% and reducing material waste to levels our engineers previously thought impossible. We assumed he was an industrial spy, Fleet Admiral Zeph Knox interjected, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had clearly lost sleep over this assumption. Incident 2, the Admiral continued relentlessly, occurred 5 weeks later. Our economic monitoring stations detected massive fluctuations in the Kepler 442 systems resource distribution networks. Investigation revealed that a humanoid female had submitted what she called optimization suggestions to various trading consortiums. These suggestions destabilized traditional supply chains across 3 systems, not through sabotage or market manipulation, but by demonstrating more efficient allocation methods that existing frameworks couldn't adapt to quickly enough. General Krath Voss's clicking grew more rapid. Surely these are coordinated intelligence operations. Incident 3 challenges that hypothesis, Defense Minister Aya Val said, her form brightening to what her species considered aggressive yellow. 2 weeks ago, Our deep space monitoring network detected unauthorized modifications to the Helix Nebula Research Station. A humanoid had somehow gained access to our xenoarchaeological survey equipment and improved it. Enhanced scanning resolution by orders of magnitude, extended operational range, and solved computational problems that our best scientists had been working on for decades. When questioned, Admiral Corv-Thess added grimly, the subject claimed she was just looking around and thought the equipment seemed lonely and underutilized. The holographic chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of the ship's systems and General Krath-Voss's increasingly frantic clicking. Now, the Admiral said, we have Incident 4. This juvenile human, who claims to be studying biochemistry, casually neutralized Station Keth-9's entire defensive grid because the energy output was interfering with her research project. Intelligence Director Kex Prime, whose species communicated primarily through pheromone release, entered the discussion by filling the chamber with chemical signals roughly translating to, "We are all going to die horribly." "Director," Fleet Admiral Zeph Knox said with forced calm, "Your assessment?" "My assessment," Kex Prime replied through the translation system, "is that we have been categorically wrong about human military capabilities. These are not random incidents. These are not coincidences. These are reconnaissance missions conducted by Earth's most elite operatives." "But they claim to be civilians," General Krath-Voss protested. "Of course they do." Defense Minister Ayaval flared brighter. "Perfect cover. What better way to infiltrate hegemony space than to pose as harmless academics and tourists?" Admiral Corv-Thess pulled up another data stream. "Our xenopsychology teams have been analyzing human behavioral patterns based on these encounters. Their conclusion is that humans operate on a completely different cognitive framework. What we consider advanced military engineering, they treat as intellectual recreation. What we classify as state-level economic warfare, they call academic exercises." "Meaning?" Fleet Admiral Zeph Knox asked, though her expression suggested she was beginning to understand the implications. "Meaning," Intelligence Director Kex Prime's pheromones now conveyed existential terror, that these might actually be their civilians. The holographic chamber erupted into overlapping conversations as military leaders tried to process this possibility. Admiral Corv-Thess waited for the chaos to subside before delivering the final piece of intelligence. "There's more," he announced, instantly silencing the room. "According to our deep space monitoring stations, Earth hasn't acknowledged any of these incidents. No military alerts, no diplomatic communications, no emergency sessions like this one. Either humans have operational security capabilities that make our intelligence networks look primitive, or what?" General Krath-Voss demanded. "Or they genuinely don't know their people are out here causing interstellar incidents," Defense Minister Ayaval finished, her energy form flickering between panic yellow and despair blue. Fleet Admiral Zeph Knox leaned forward, her scales shifting to the dark patterns her species associated with predatory focus. "Director Kex Prime, what's your analysis of Earth's actual military capabilities if these are truly civilian operations?" The pheromone cloud that filled the chamber would have required extensive translation, but the general sentiment was clear. Absolute, unmitigated terror, seasoned with a garnish of professional respect. "Unknown and potentially incalculable," Kex Prime finally managed through the speakers. "If their students can casually reorganize our industrial processes, and their recent graduates can accidentally destabilize our economic systems, then their actual military forces operate at capability levels we have no framework to assess." "Recommendation?" Admiral Corv-Thess asked. The assembled commanders exchanged glances, some visual, others chemical, several electromagnetic. The consensus was unanimous and terrifying. "Avoid contact with Earth at all costs," General Krath-Voss said, his clicking now resembling something close to prayer. "If these are their tourists and students, we definitely don't want to meet their soldiers." Motion seconded, Fleet Admiral Zefnox agreed grimly. File Earth under civilizations too dangerous for diplomatic contact, and establish a minimum safe distance of, let's say, 50 light-years. Make it 100, Defense Minister Ioval suggested, just to be safe. Admiral Corv Thess nodded solemnly. Very well. Earth is now classified as a level Omega threat. All hegemony vessels are to maintain maximum distance and under no circumstances attempt contact. What none of them realized was that Earth's total awareness of the hegemony's existence was currently limited to one college student who thought they seemed nice, but really needed better food in their detention facilities. Zara had been in worse places than an alien detention cell. Organic chemistry lab during finals week, for instance. Or that time she'd gotten locked in the library basement during a power outage and had to survive on vending machine snacks for 18 hours. At least here, the lighting was consistent, even if it was tuned to a spectrum that made everything look like an old sepia photograph. She'd finished analyzing the molecular composition of the walls around hour 6, some kind of titanium-vanadium alloy with interesting crystalline properties, and moved on to reverse engineering the atmospheric recycling system by hour 8. By hour 12, she'd worked out the basic principles behind their gravity generation, which was honestly pretty clever, though she could think of 3 ways to improve the efficiency off the top of her head. The real puzzle wasn't the technology. That was actually refreshingly straightforward once you got past their tendency to overcomplicate simple engineering problems. No, the real puzzle was why her hosts kept asking such strange questions. They seemed genuinely confused by the concept of academic research. When she'd tried to explain her thesis project on exotic particle interactions in sub-quantum field matrices, they'd gotten this look. Well, as much as she could read alien expressions, that suggested she'd just described how to build a doomsday device using kitchen supplies. Which was ridiculous. You couldn't build a doomsday device with kitchen supplies. You'd need at least a basic chemistry set. Zara stretched in the oddly shaped chair, which had clearly been designed for beings with different joint articulation, and wondered if she should be more concerned about missing Professor Chen's deadline for her midterm project. She'd already gathered some fascinating data about alien physiological responses to stress. Apparently, the interrogator with the sensory tendrils released fascinating pheromone combinations when confused. But her academic advisor was notorious for not accepting "I was detained by aliens" as an excuse for late submissions. The cell door made a soft chiming sound, and she looked up hopefully. Maybe they were bringing better food, or someone who actually understood physics well enough to have a proper conversation about quantum mechanics. The hegemony's grasp of theoretical science was impressively comprehensive, but weirdly outdated, like they'd gotten stuck around the equivalent of human early 21st century understanding, and never pushed further. Instead of food or more competent scientists, Chief Interrogator Vex Ka entered alone, looking remarkably like someone who had spent the last several hours having his worldview systematically dismantled. "Hello again," Zara said cheerfully. "Did you have a chance to review those calculations I left on the wall? Because I think your power distribution system has some really elegant solutions to the harmonic resonance problem, but there's a much simpler approach using nested field equations that could probably cut your energy costs by—" "Stop," Vexka said, raising 2 of his 4 hands in what she was beginning to recognize as a universal gesture of overwhelmed surrender. "Please, we need to discuss something important." Zara tilted her head, genuinely curious. "Of course. What would you like to know?" "Your planet," he said carefully, settling into the interrogator's chair with the deliberate movements of someone trying to defuse a bomb. "Earth. How many others like you are there?" "Like me, how?" "Biochemistry majors? Probably several thousand, though the field's been growing since they started the new nanoscale research programs." "No, I mean..." Vex Ka's sensory tendrils writhed in what was probably frustration. Individuals with your capabilities. You mean humans? Zara blinked. About 8 billion, last I checked. Maybe 8.5 by now. The population growth curve has been leveling off in developed regions, but there's still significant expansion in 8 billion. Vexka's voice came out as barely a whisper. 8 billion beings capable of what you've demonstrated. Zara frowned, trying to figure out what he was getting at. Well, not everyone's interested in engineering, obviously. Some people focus on art, or history, or social sciences. My roommate Emma is studying xenosociology. That's theoretical models of how alien civilizations might develop. She's actually been working on this fascinating paper about resource allocation patterns in spacefaring societies that I think you'd find interesting. Your roommate studies alien civilizations. Theoretically, yes. I mean, we didn't know you guys actually existed until I ran into your space station. Emma's going to be so excited when I tell her. She's been trying to model how different environmental pressures might influence technological development paths, and you're a perfect example of distributed population systems with coordinated resource management. Vexka stared at her with the expression of someone watching reality fold in on itself. You're treating this as an academic opportunity. Well, yes. This is incredibly valuable primary source data. Do you know how hard it is to get funding for xenosociology research when everyone assumes it's purely speculative? Zara's enthusiasm was building as she considered the implications. Emma could probably write her entire dissertation just on your social organizational structures, and the linguistics applications alone. You're not concerned about being captured by an alien military force. Zara paused, considering this. Are you planning to hurt me? No, but are you going to prevent me from continuing my research? We're still determining. Then I'm not particularly worried. She shrugged. Besides, you've been really accommodating, all things considered. Though I do have some suggestions about the food delivery system. The nutritional balance is fine for my metabolic needs, but the flavor profiles could use some work. Vexka made a sound that his species probably didn't have a word for, but humans might recognize as the noise someone makes when their brain starts to short-circuit. Your people, he said slowly. They're all like this? Like what? Curious. Unafraid. Casually brilliant. Zara considered this. I suppose? I mean, humans tend to be pretty adaptable. We get interested in things, we ask questions, we try to figure out how stuff works. It's kind of our default setting. And your educational systems produce individuals capable of analyzing and improving technologies they've never encountered before. That's sort of the point of education, isn't it? Teaching people to think critically and solve problems creatively. Zara looked at him with growing concern. Are you okay? Your biochemical signatures are suggesting some kind of stress response. Vexka stood abruptly, his forearms trembling slightly. I need to report this conversation. Sure, no problem. Oh, and when you do, could you mention that I'm supposed to submit my research proposal by next Friday? I know it's probably not your priority, but I'd hate to fall behind on my degree requirements because of interdimensional travel complications. After he left, Zara sat back in the uncomfortable chair and gazed up at the ceiling, which featured interesting geometric patterns that seemed to serve both aesthetic and functional purposes. The more she observed her captors, the more she was beginning to suspect that the hegemony's technological development had followed a very different path from humanity's. They'd clearly mastered impressive engineering techniques, but their approach seemed almost conservative. Like they'd found solutions that worked and then stopped pushing boundaries. Humans would never do that. Humans would find a perfectly functional solution and immediately start wondering if they could make it work better, faster, more efficiently, or in completely new ways. Which raised an interesting question about comparative developmental psychology that Emma would absolutely love to sink her teeth into. Zara smiled and went back to sketching improved power coupling designs on the wall. She was pretty sure she could solve their harmonic resonance issues entirely, but she wanted to double-check her math first. After all, this was going to be part of her research report, and Professor Chen was very particular about showing detailed work. 27 hours after Admiral Corv Thess classified Earth as a level Omega threat, Zara decided she'd had enough of alien hospitality. It wasn't the accommodation. The bed was actually more comfortable than her dorm room cot. And it wasn't the company, since the interrogators had become surprisingly good conversationalists once they stopped asking weird questions about military hierarchies and started letting her explain basic thermodynamics. The problem was the food, which tasted like someone had tried to recreate human cuisine using only chemical analysis and a profound misunderstanding of flavor compounds. Also, she had a quantum mechanics exam on Tuesday, and Professor Williams definitely wouldn't accept detained by well-meaning, but technologically behind aliens as an excuse for missing it. The security system proved less challenging than her freshman year computer science assignments. Whoever had designed it had clearly prioritized keeping people in rather than keeping people with basic programming knowledge from rewriting the access protocols. Zara spent a pleasant morning teaching herself their coding language, which was surprisingly elegant, if a bit verbose, and another hour optimizing their encryption algorithms while she was at it. By lunch, she was walking through the corridors of Station Keth 9 with a temporary access badge she'd printed using their fabrication systems, and a cheerful goodbye note for the interrogators explaining that she'd left her improvements to their power grid in the main computer system with full documentation. The hangar bay contained 3 small spacecraft that looked designed for local system transport. Zara picked the one with the most interesting propulsion configuration and spent 40 minutes figuring out how to hot-wire the ignition systems. The control interface was intuitive enough. Big red button probably meant stop. Blinking green lights usually indicated everything working, normally, and within an hour she was piloting her borrowed spacecraft toward the edge of the system. She was halfway to the hyperspace jump point when her borrowed ship's communication system chimed with an incoming transmission. Zara activated the receiver, expecting security forces demanding her return. Instead, she found herself looking at her older brother Jake, who was sitting in what appeared to be a coffee shop and wearing a t-shirt that read, "MIT Engineering, we fix everything." "Zara, there you are," Jake said with the tone of someone who had been mildly worried, but not surprised. "Mom was starting to wonder if you'd gotten lost again. How's the independent study project going?" "Really well, actually," Zara replied, settling back in the pilot's seat as the autopilot handled the boring parts of navigation. "I met some aliens. They're sweet, but their technology is kind of primitive. Like they've figured out faster-than-light travel and artificial gravity, but they're still using linear processing architectures for their computer systems." "Huh. That's weird. You'd think faster than light would come after better computing." Jake took a sip of coffee. "Are they friendly?" "Very. A little confused about some things, though. They kept asking about Earth's military capabilities, and seemed really worried when I mentioned how many people live here. I think they might have some anxiety issues as a species." "Oh, that's kind of sad. Maya ran into something similar with her economics project. The trading consortium she was working with got all nervous when she showed them optimal resource distribution models. Apparently, they'd never seen efficiency curves that steep." "Speaking of Maya, is she around? I wanted to ask about hyperspace mechanics. These guys have a really interesting approach to dimensional folding, but I think there might be some safety improvements." "Maya!" Jake called over his shoulder. "Zara's on the space phone!" Their sister's voice came from somewhere off camera. "Tell her I finished the risk assessment for her xenobiology paper. The statistical models look good, but she should probably include more data points about cultural adaptation patterns." "Did you hear that?" Jake asked. Yeah, thanks, Maya. Oh, and Jake, remember that construction job you had last summer? The one with the really advanced manufacturing systems? Sure, what about it? The people who ran those systems think you infiltrated their military-industrial complex. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. What? I was just asking questions about their fabrication processes. The supervisor seemed happy to explain how everything worked. Apparently, they classified you as a special operative conducting reconnaissance missions. Wow. That's actually kind of flattering, I guess, though also concerning. Do they think we're planning to invade them or something? Zara considered this while watching hyperspace coordinates align on her navigation display. I think they're just really, really bad at understanding motivation. Like they couldn't figure out why you'd want to learn about their technology unless you were planning to steal it for military purposes. But learning about stuff is fun. I know, right? That's what I kept trying to explain. Maya's voice carried from the background again. Zara, are you coming home soon? Because I found some really interesting economic data from those trading systems, and I think there might be applications for sustainable development models. Actually flying back now. I borrowed one of their ships. Don't worry, I left them detailed instructions for building a better one. Should be home by Thursday. Cool, bring samples if you can. I'm curious about their metallurgy. Jake grinned at the camera. So, typical Tuesday for the Chen family. Zara accidentally becomes an interstellar incident. Maya revolutionizes alien economics. And I apparently infiltrated a military installation by asking too many questions about engineering. Pretty much. Oh, and Jake? They've classified Earth as too dangerous for contact and established a 100 light-year minimum safe distance. Because of us? Because they think we're all elite Special Forces operatives disguised as civilians. Jake laughed, the kind of delighted laughter that came from encountering something so absurd, it looped back around to being wonderful. Wait until I tell the guys at work. Hey everyone, guess what? We're all apparently super soldiers now. The really funny part, Zara said as her ship entered hyperspace, and the stars shifted into familiar patterns, is that they made this decision right after I explained that we have 8 billion people, most of whom go through basically the same educational system we did. Oh no. Oh yes. They think there are 8 billion beings like us just wandering around Earth, casually solving engineering problems and reorganizing economic systems for fun. Maya's voice drifted from off-camera. To be fair, that's not entirely inaccurate. True, Jake agreed. I mean, humans do tend to poke at things until they figure out how they work. And then try to make them work better, Zara added. It's basically our species' defining characteristic. As her borrowed spacecraft oriented toward Sol system and engaged the final hyperspace jump, Zara reflected on the cosmic irony of the situation. The hegemony had encountered 4 humans conducting perfectly normal human activities, curiosity-driven research, academic exercises, and the irrepressible urge to tinker with interesting technology, and concluded that Earth represented an existential threat to galactic civilization. They weren't entirely wrong. Humans did have a tendency to casually revolutionize things they encountered, usually without meaning to cause trouble. They just couldn't help asking, but what if we tried it this way instead? And then following through to see what would happen. The hegemony, with their careful hierarchies and conservative technological development, had never encountered a species for whom let's see what happens was considered a reasonable approach to problem solving. By the time Zara reached Earth, the hegemony had already begun implementing expanded safety protocols around their new minimum contact zone. They would spend the next several decades developing increasingly sophisticated theories about human military capabilities, never realizing that their most accurate intelligence came from a biochemistry major who wrote an A+ research paper about comparative analysis of spacefaring. Civilizations, a case study in conservative versus progressive technological development. Professor Chen was particularly impressed with the primary source data.